Before Europe even knew how to pronounce his name properly, Neymar Jr. was already a phenomenon. At Santos, he was football turned into music, part street samba, part chaos theory. By 18, he was the country's obsession, the YouTube highlight machine with the mohawk and the grin, the kid who humiliated defenders twice his age. He scored goals that felt like illusions, twisting the laws of physics into art. One of them, a slaloming run finished with a no-look chip, won him the 2011 Puskás Award before he had even set foot in Europe. He'd already lifted the Libertadores, Brazil's Champions League, and carried Santos to trophies their fans hadn't tasted since Pelé's era. Brands fought to own his smile. Commentators called him the savior of Brazilian joy. In a country where every kid grows up chasing the ghost of Pelé, Neymar wasn't the next in line. He was the face of a generation that refused to wait for another hero. So, when Barcelona came calling in 2013, it wasn't a signing. It was more, Neymar was signed for €57 million, which made him the most expensive Brazilian ever at the time. And overnight, the boy who had ruled Brazil was now standing beside the man who ruled football itself, Lionel Messi. But upon arriving in Barca, the contrast was striking from day one. At Santos, Neymar was the sun. The team revolved around him. At Barcelona, he was orbiting someone else's gravity. At the time, Barca wasn't just a club, it was Messi's kingdom. Messi was already established as GOAT at the time, as the reigning Ballon d'Or winner. The system, the tactics, even the stadium's rhythm pulsed to his heartbeat. He was the god of the Camp Nou, and Neymar was the prodigy forced to live under his divine reign. The Spanish media instantly built the tension. Every training photo, every goal celebration, every missed chance came with the same headline: can Neymar coexist with Messi? And if the media didn't ask, the fans did. Messi was calm, silent, otherworldly. Neymar was expressive, loud, and human. Fire and ice are sharing the same shirt. At first, the adaptation was brutal. In Brazil, he was allowed to improvise. In Spain, he had to fit the pattern. Barcelona's football was geometry. Neymar's was poetry. And poetry, in a world of where triangles and tactics exist, felt like a misfit. Luis Enrique later said, he wanted to dribble where we wanted him to pass. The Spanish defenders didn't fear him yet. They studied him, waiting for him to try something wild, so they could laugh when it failed. And fail he did, sometimes. He easily lost balls and forced runs, and his frustration was constantly disguised with a smile. But beneath that smile, Neymar was studying the Spanish defenders as well. He was watching how Messi moved into space, how he killed a game without raising his voice. He realized greatness wasn't just about being seen, it was about being inevitable. He started reshaping his game, less street, more structure, but never losing the spark that made him who he was. And even when he adapted, the headlines never did. When he scored, they still said Messi inspired him. When he missed, they said he'll never be Messi. It didn't matter what he did, he was living inside another man's metaphor. Yet the fans in Brazil saw something the world didn't: the flicker, that moment in every match where Neymar ignored the system and played like the kid from Santos again. The drop of the shoulder, the elasticos, the arrogance that whispered, I belong here. He was learning, quietly, painfully, beautifully. But deep inside, another realization began to bloom, a dangerous one. If I can shine this bright beside him, imagine how bright I'd be on my own. Barcelona thought they had bought a sidekick. Brazil knew they had raised a superstar. And somewhere between the two, Neymar stood, trapped between obedience and destiny. He had come to Barcelona to learn from Messi, but every goal, every roar from the Camp Nou only made the shadow bigger. What no one realized was that beneath the smiles, a storm was brewing. Because before Neymar ever tried to escape Messi's shadow, he helped build it even bigger. This video is sponsored by FanTeam Sportsbook. What makes FanTeam different is their player-first approach. They focus on fair odds, transparent pricing, and a clean platform built specifically for sports fans. If you're in the UK and want a more straightforward, no-nonsense betting experience, check out FanTeam using the link in the description. By the summer of 2014, Barcelona was no longer the flawless machine it once was. Xavi and Iniesta were aging, Pep was gone, the tiki-taka era was fading. And suddenly, the club that once played perfect football was desperate for new energy, something raw, unpredictable, alive. That's when Luis Suarez arrived, a warrior, a brawler, a striker who played like he was still fighting for food. And with him, something unimaginable was born, a front three of Messi, Suarez, Neymar, or as we now know it, the iconic MSN trio. 3 players from 3 worlds, with 3 egos too big for one stadium. But together, they became the most devastating frontline football had ever seen. At first, it was chaos. Messi drifting central, Suarez dropping deep, Neymar hugging the left touchline, waiting to explode. But within weeks, that chaos found rhythm. They stopped trying to define roles and started trusting instincts. Barcelona had evolved, no longer about passing 1,000 times, but about striking once and killing you instantly. The press called them MSN, and soon, defenders were calling them nightmares. For Neymar, this was liberation. With Suarez bulldozing centre-backs and Messi commanding double marking, he finally had space to dance, to create, to be himself again. That left flank became his playground. He was faster, sharper, crueler. Every game, he looked less like a student and more like a storm, and he exploded like it too. In 2015, he didn't just shine, he erupted. That season, Neymar scored 39 goals and assisted 10 more, including goals in both the Champions League semi-final and the final. Barcelona won the treble, and Neymar was no longer Messi's apprentice. Yet, even at the height of his brilliance, the narrative didn't change. The headlines read, "Messi's Barcelona wins the treble," and not, "Neymar destroys Europe." Every dribble, every goal, still lived in someone else's shadow. Even when Neymar finished as the Champions League's joint top scorer with Messi and Ronaldo, the world only saw one name, and it wasn't his. Still, he smiled, because while the world wasn't watching, he was learning again, this time, how to lead quietly. By 2016, MSN had become football's most terrifying equation. They scored 131 goals in one season, the most by any trio in history. No defense could contain them. No system could stop them. When Neymar was on the ball, Messi and Suarez didn't even need to move. They just waited, because they knew something was coming. He was no longer trying to be Messi. He was being Neymar, expressive, ruthless, free. He'd evolved from highlight reel prodigy to tactical weapon, and in doing so, he reminded Barcelona of something they had forgotten, that football wasn't meant to be perfect, it was meant to make you feel something. But while he was busy creating magic, something deeper was starting to eat away at him, because when the lights faded after every victory, the applause never quite reached his name, and for someone who had carried the dreams of a country, being invisible hurt more than losing. The world thought MSN was unbreakable, but inside that brotherhood, cracks were forming. Messi was still the face, Suarez was still the fighter, and Neymar the artist was still the side note. He'd given Barcelona everything. Goals, assists, glory. And yet, when awards season came, his name was always mentioned after someone else's. He loved Messi, he respected him, but every love story has a breaking point, and Neymar's was coming faster than anyone imagined. Because one night in 2007 would change everything. That's it. Don't tell anything about legacy, purpose. Otherwise, we give too much info away too early. February 14, 2017, Valentine's Day, but there was no love in Paris that night. For years, Barcelona had been the symbol of dominance, the team everyone feared, the club that turned football into art. But by the time they walked into the Parc des Princes that evening, the aura was fading. Luis Enrique's side looked tired, predictable, human, and somewhere deep down, Neymar could feel it too. This wasn't the same Barcelona that had conquered Europe 2 years earlier. The triangles weren't clicking, the rhythm was gone, and the players were starting to doubt what had once felt divine. PSG smelled blood. They pressed with arrogance. They attacked without fear. And Neymar, the boy once destined to rule the world, was left chasing shadows. By halftime, it was 2-0. By full-time, it was 4-0. It was almost unimaginable that the MSN team was beatable. They were left toothless against an aging PSG side. The cameras panned to Messi, frozen, silent, lost. Suarez looked broken, and Neymar, for the first time in his Barcelona career, looked helpless. The headlines the next morning were merciless. Barcelona's empire collapses. Messi finished, the end of an era. It was the first time in over a decade that Barcelona had been dismantled so completely. And while the world pointed fingers at the entire team, Neymar took it personally. He tried everything that night, tracking back, carrying the ball, winning fouls, but nothing worked. PSG's midfield suffocated him. Every time he looked up, 3 men were waiting. No space, no rhythm, no magic. For the first time in years, Neymar felt small again, like that 1-year-old who once arrived at Camp Nou full of hope, now buried beneath it. When he walked off the pitch, the cameras caught his expression. Not anger, not sadness. He didn't say much that night, but teammates later revealed that in the dressing room, he looked at the floor and muttered, "This won't be how it ends." And the thing about Neymar, when he says something quietly, he means it violently. At the time, no team in Champions League history had had ever overturned a 4-0 deficit, ever. But as the days passed, something began to change at Barcelona's training ground. While others looked defeated, Neymar looked possessed. He trained longer, talked less, and played with a fury that even Messi hadn't seen before. Teammates said he'd show up before sunrise, running drills, rehearsing free kicks until his socks were soaked. He refused to lose, not to PSG, not to the press, not to history. He told his close friend Dani Alves over the phone, "This time, I'm not playing for them, I'm playing for me." When the second leg approached, Camp Nou buzzed with hopeless optimism, the kind only football can produce. People came, not expecting a miracle, but needing one. And in that noise, one man, not Messi, not Suarez, stood utterly still, staring at the grass, whispering something to himself. It was Neymar, and everyone who knew him could tell that he was about to burn the world down. In every era, there comes a night that changes everything. For Maradona, it was England '86. For Messi, it was Rome 2009. But for Neymar, it was coming. It was a night that would silence every critic, break every narrative, and prove that he, not anyone else, could carry Barcelona when the world thought they were finished. In the quiet before that night, Neymar raised his head to the sky and asked, "God, give me the power I need to make things turn around." The question was, did God listen? Because what came next wouldn't just save Barcelona's season, it would rewrite Neymar's destiny and football's understanding of what's possible. March 8, 2017. Camp Nou wasn't a stadium that night. It was a volcano. Almost 100,000 people filled it, desperate, praying, begging for something history had promised would never happen. Barcelona needed to overturn a 4-0 defeat from the first leg against PSG. No team had ever done it. Not once. But this was Barcelona, and Barcelona had Messi. That's what everyone said. Everyone, except Neymar. He didn't care about history, or math, or odds. He just cared about redemption. He had spent 3 weeks living inside that humiliation, the memes, the headlines, the mockery, and deep down, he knew this wasn't about saving a season, it was about saving himself. Ayut was about showing the world he was capable of his own spotlight. From kickoff, Barcelona came alive like men possessed. Suarez scored in the 3rd minute, then a PSG own goal, then a Messi penalty was awarded after a player tripped Neymar. It was 3-0, and for a brief, wild moment, their wild dream looked alive. But football is cruel. In the 62nd minute, Edinson Cavani shattered the illusion. A single away goal, 3-1, and the aggregate score now 5-3. Barcelona needed 3 more goals. In 30 minutes, the stadium went silent. You could hear the disbelief in every breath, the heartbreak in every clap. Even Messi looked defeated. Suarez's run slowed. The PSG players smirked, passing the ball around like the job was done. But Neymar didn't stop. From the moment PSG let their guard down, Neymar switched the entire game on its head. He fought like a man who refused to read the script. He was fouled, tackled, shoved, and he kept coming. He was angry, furious, brilliant. Every touch carried defiance. As the clock hit 87 minutes, most fans were already crying. The chants had quieted. People were starting to leave. And then everything changed. Minute 88. Neymar stands over a free kick 25 yards out. He takes 3 steps, whips it over the wall, and bends it into the top corner. 4-1. Camp Nou erupts. It was almost as if someone had lit a spark in the darkness. But here's the thing. Neymar doesn't celebrate. He grabs the ball, sprints to the halfway line. There's no time for joy, only belief. Then minute 91. Suarez wins a penalty. Messi doesn't step up. Neither does Iniesta. It's Neymar. The boy who once played in Messi's shadow now stands where gods stand. He breathes, waits, and with the calm of 1,000 backyard penalties, he slots it in the bottom corner. 5-1. Now, Camp Nou is shaking, literally shaking. Fans are screaming, hugging strangers, praying and swearing all at once. Could it actually happen? Well, in minute 95, they got their answer. It was the last attack, last breath. Ter Stegen, the goalkeeper, is at midfield. Everyone's forward. A free kick ball finds Neymar on the left edge of the box. He doesn't panic. He waits, just long enough for the entire PSG defense to collapse toward him. Then, with one delicate scoop, he lifts the ball into space. And like destiny itself had been waiting for that pass, Sergi Roberto bursts through and pokes it home. 6-1. Time stops. The commentary breaks. Tears, chaos, disbelief. The impossible had just happened, and Neymar was the architect. He falls to his knees, buried under a pile of teammates. In those 7 minutes, he didn't just win a football match. He rewrote football itself. That night wasn't about Messi. It wasn't about Barcelona. It was about Neymar. 3 goal contributions in 7 minutes. A performance so outrageous that even history needed a moment to understand it. But here's the crazy part. When the celebrations ended and the lights went out, something would happen. Something so crazy, it sets off the biggest butterfly effect ever in Barcelona's history. March 9, 2017. Barcelona had just completed the greatest comeback in football history. Fans stayed up all night re-watching the match. The city didn't sleep, and even the commentators had run out of superlatives to describe what they had just seen. But when the sun rose, something felt wrong. Neymar woke up expecting to see his name everywhere. Headlines, highlights, history. Instead, every front page told a different story. Messi leads Barcelona's miracle. Messi saves Barcelona. Messi's greatest night. And in smaller letters, almost as an afterthought, Neymar scores twice. He sat in silence, scrolling through headlines that barely mentioned him. The man who had scored 2 goals and assisted the winner in 7 minutes. It wasn't disbelief. It was clarity. He realized that even on the night he'd played like a god, the world had already decided who their savior was supposed to be. Inside the dressing room, the atmosphere was electric but divided. Messi's name echoed through chants. Journalists crowded around him, cameras flashing. Neymar sat quietly in the corner, still drenched in sweat, his body vibrating with adrenaline. Teammates came over to congratulate him. Suarez, Piqué, even Iniesta. But the media's circus had already moved to Messi's locker. It wasn't envy, it was invisibility. Because when you do everything right and still get treated like a side note, something inside you changes. That night, Neymar went home and re-watched the entire match. He studied every goal, every touch, every reaction. He didn't do it for nostalgia, he did it to understand. The more he watched, the clearer it became. It wasn't about what he did wrong, it was about what the world refused to see. In the weeks that followed, the injustice grew heavier. Every interview, every show, every pundit talked about Messi's magic. Even UEFA's official highlight reel cut Neymar's free kick shorter, as if his role needed to be edited down to fit someone else's legend. Spanish media called it Messi's miracle, French media called it Paris's nightmare, but no one called it what it truly was, Neymar's masterpiece. And deep down, he began to realize something terrifying. As long as he stayed at Barcelona, he could score a hat-trick in a Champions League final and still be known as Messi's apprentice. In one interview, when asked how he felt after the comeback, he smiled politely and said, "I'm happy we won." But the way he said it quiet, restrained, told a different story. Behind the smile was exhaustion, not from running, not from pressure, but from constantly proving himself to people who'd already made up their minds. Something broke that night, not in anger, but in resolve. Before the next season began, Neymar's relationship with the club quietly changed. He still performed, still smiled, still celebrated with Messi, but his heart wasn't there anymore. Every time the cameras zoomed in on the two of them, the world saw friendship. He gave his all for this club and played in the most dominant area of football history, but something was missing. Neymar felt empty. Neymar was about to make a decision that would shake the foundations of football. In football, there are moments that define players. For Messi, it was Rome. For Ronaldo, Lisbon. For Neymar, it was that night in 2017, the night he performed like a god and was treated like a ghost. He'd given Barcelona one of the greatest miracles ever seen, yet the next morning, he wasn't the hero. He was the subtext below the headline. That's when something shifted. The boy who once idolized Messi began to realize the uncomfortable truth. You can't become the sun if you keep orbiting another star. Barcelona had always been Messi's kingdom. The team, the tactics, even the media revolved around him. And while Neymar loved him like a brother, he knew deep down that brotherhood came at the cost of identity. He didn't want to be Messi's partner, he wanted to be Neymar, the main act. And soon, the relationship would shatter. By the summer of 2017, PSG came knocking. They didn't want Neymar the winger, they wanted Neymar the king. Their message was clear. Come to Paris, build your own legacy, be the face of everything. It wasn't just a transfer, it was a declaration of war on the football hierarchy. €222 million, the most expensive transfer in football history. A number so absurd it felt symbolic, like PSG was trying to buy freedom itself. Barcelona laughed at first, then they panicked. Suarez tried to convince him to stay. Messi took him out to dinner, looked him in the eye, and said, "What more do you want? You're already playing for the best team in the world." But that was exactly the point. He didn't want to play for the best team. He wanted to become the reason it was the best. So while the football world debated whether he was chasing money or ego, Neymar quietly made his decision. He wasn't running from Messi, he was running toward himself. On August 3, 2017, it became official. Neymar da Silva Santos Jr. was leaving Barcelona for PSG. The reaction was nuclear. Fans burned his jerseys. Pundits called him selfish, ungrateful, even foolish. How could anyone leave Messi? How could anyone walk away from perfection? But they didn't understand. Neymar wasn't leaving success. He was leaving someone else's story. At his unveiling in Paris, he stood under the Eiffel Tower, smiling that same mischievous smile he'd worn since Santos, and said, "I wanted a new challenge, a new dream." For the first time in his life, he wasn't part of a system. He was the system. And ironically, the team he had destroyed months earlier was now his new home. The same club whose fans had wept under his brilliance was now betting its entire future on him. In a way, it was poetic. He left the shadow of Messi to light his own and joined the very team he'd once humiliated to prove that he could do it alone. Years have passed since that decision, and debates still rage. Some say he never fulfilled his potential. Others argue he was too good for the era he was born into, a magician trapped in the analytics age. But what can't be denied is this: that night against PSG changed football forever. It wasn't just a comeback, it was the birth of modern player autonomy, a moment that told every young superstar, you don't have to live in someone else's shadow to matter. Neymar's €222 million move opened a new chapter in football's economy, rewired the transfer market, and redefined what it meant to own your legacy. He may not have won Ballon d'Ors like Messi or Ronaldo, but he did something arguably more rebellious. He refused to be anyone but himself. From Santos's beaches to Camp Nou's bright lights, from humiliation in Paris to immortality in 7 minutes, Neymar's story isn't about trophies. It's about identity. He destroyed PSG that night, made Messi look human, and reminded the world that football, at its core, isn't just about greatness. It's about daring to break the script. And that's why, years later, when fans look back at that night in 2017, they don't see it as Barcelona's comeback anymore. They see it for what it truly was: the night Neymar Jr. destroyed PSG and made Messi look average.